You think that you love growth, but you really just hate yourself. You're obsessed with growth because it seems like the only solution. A couple months ago, I had to face this uncomfortable truth. I believed that my quest for growth was noble, that it was rooted in a healthy place, but it was really just an attempt to escape my self-hatred. I had to accept that over my life, I have sacrificed my inner peace, my relationships, and my well-being because I thought that growth would save me. It didn't. Welcome to Progress Theory. My name is Garrett, and in this episode, I am going to be discussing one of the most universal traps that people experience when they pursue growth and self-development. A study that I have seen online fairly frequently details the three most common traits among extraordinary achievers. There are three of them: delusions of grandeur, strong impulse control, and crippling insecurity. Now, these all make sense. Delusions of grandeur is absolutely necessary. In order to achieve something extraordinary, achieve something incredibly rare, you have to first believe that you're capable of doing so, with no proof and no experience to validate that belief. To some degree, it is delusion until you prove it's not. And you have to have that delusion in order to attempt something so ridiculous. Strong impulse control, absolute necessity. Achieving something extraordinary also requires very consistent and deliberate effort over a extended period of time. If someone is susceptible to falling victim to the distractions and temptations that are all around us, they will probably be deterred and steered off their path. And they probably will not be able to make or maintain the sacrifices necessary to actually accomplish something extraordinary. These two matter. They're important. But I think the most telling trait in this study that was revealed was crippling insecurity. Again, makes perfect sense. In order to do something extraordinary, it requires a lot of sacrifice and a lot of pain, more than likely. In order to make sacrifice consistently over a long period of time, there has to be some strong source of motivation behind it. There needs to be a powerful fuel source that is able to drive that kind of effort and that kind of resiliency. And inadequacy and self-hatred and this feeling that I am not good enough and I need to prove my worth to this universe, that is a powerful source of motivation. That is useful fuel. Now, from what I can tell, the origin of most people's desire to grow is their deep-rooted inadequacy or sense of worthlessness. Some experience, our set of experiences that happened in our past, not only solidified, it created and continually reinforced a belief that we are broken, are inadequate, are unworthy, unwanted, not good enough, generally useless. Speaking for myself, at least, in my own experience, I have struggled with insecurity deeply my entire life, or at least the life that I primarily remember. I, for as long as I can remember, have not liked my face or my body or my confidence, or my social ability, or my circumstances. In general, I have found every aspect of me inadequate and undesirable. And for a long time, I did not know how to cope with that. To be honest, I wasn't even fully aware of it. I was aware of it and how it impacted my experience, but I wasn't thinking deeply about it. And my subconscious solution to this problem was escapism. It was addictive, compulsive behavior. I just naturally fell into the human tendency to try to cover up pain with pleasure, and utilized instant gratification as often as I could to make me feel good, because I never did. And it didn't work. It was not effective, but it was the only solution I knew at the time. And when I got to college, I really thought I found a better solution. Self-improvement, personal development, the self-help movement. And it seemed awesome. It seemed well worth jumping into. I did all of it. I tried to incorporate and instill every single positive habit that was designed to optimize my growth and turn me into the best version of myself. I created most people, including myself, looking back, most people would say, ridiculous vision for the future. I had a detailed map for the next 50 years of my life, what it would look like, and I set goals for pretty much every year for the next 30 to 50 years because I was obsessed. I believed with certainty that I would get there. And I was not aware at the start that it was all rooted in inadequacy, that my entire being, my sense of identity was built around this idea that I'm not good enough and I need to get better. And over time, I obviously, not only was I reading a lot of books about personal development, but I jumped into the self-development movement online. It's probably a little meta for me to talk about because to some extent this is a channel rooted in growth and human transformation, and as much as I don't want to claim the title self-development, it kind of is. But I jumped into the massive industry online of self-development. There is this huge movement that I think to some degree is healthy, but to a large degree isn't. It capitalizes on people's pain by selling a faulty, unrewarding solution. But in doing so, I saw millions of people in comments and forums and in videos and just being a part of this movement for so long who clearly hated themselves. I don't know if I would have called it out at the time because I was so trapped within the belief system and the underlying sense of inadequacy that fueled my desire. I could not see clearly. I was, and still am, living in a subjective reality, but it was a lot more foggy back then. But the overarching commonality between everyone I saw in that space was this feeling that they need to get better. There's something about them that is inadequate, is not worth anything, and it needs to change. And growth is the solution. If you just grow enough, you'll feel better. And what this created in me over the course of 7 years of being involved in this movement and exploring it and trying to incorporate it into my life, failing to do so a lot, I'll emphasize, was eventually growth became the top of my value hierarchy. I deified it. It was everything. I truly began believing that the key to living a fulfilling life, the only life that was actually worth living, was a life in which I pursued growth and achievement to the highest extent and sacrificed every other aspect of life for that goal. And that seemed like everything. If you've listened this far into the episode, I imagine that there is a good chance that you connect with this to some extent. And if you do, you probably care about growth. And I think your growth is probably somewhat, if not completely, rooted in the same painful, crippling inadequacy. And if so, it is destroying your chance of finding actual fulfillment and joy. Recently, I had the most liberating psychological breakdown I have experienced yet in my life. It was horrible at the time, but it taught me this. Our quest for growth can eviscerate our well-being. Our quest for well-being will result in a substantial amount of growth, but it will, without sacrificing our joy, our well-being in the process. From what I can tell when I look at those two options, one path is clearly better than the other. And to highlight this, I want to explore a little bit more in depth the difference between a growth-centered value system and a well-being-centered value system. Value systems are a fairly complex topic when actually trying to understand them within ourselves, but in general, and very simplified, we all have a value hierarchy that we hold within our mind. I think it's really hard to decipher what it is, and our conscious awareness often is not able to catch what's really fueling us, but everyone has it. Some people, family's the top, faith is the top, greed, happiness, growth, fulfillment, well-being. There's all these different things that can be at the top, and everything else is secondary to it. Everything else is worth being sacrificed in order to meet and live in alignment with the overarching value that your life is built around. And I have really come to believe that having growth at the top of this value system has a lot of extremely negative consequences. The most guilt-inducing and painful for me, looking back on my past, is my tendency to devalue and even use people in my life. When growth is everything, especially when growth for the sake of fixing a sense of inadequacy and earning your right to exist is the center of your way of being in this world, that is the value system you judge everyone else by. And I'll speak for myself. I think a lot of people do this, but I'll speak for myself because I don't know others like I know myself. I have had a tendency to use other people and to judge their value based on how well, or based on how they impacted my ability to maximize my own growth. The lens in which I judged other people was, how are they influencing me? How are they going to affect my ability to accomplish my insane goals? Because if they diminish my ability at all, I can't be around them. Because if I'm around them and they diminish my ability, I'll never achieve my goals and I will be worthless forever. And it's taken me a long time to recognize that that was a thought process. And it caused me a lot of guilt looking back at how I have treated people, because to some extent, you see them as a tool when you operate like this. You see people and you judge them based on the same broken value system that you judge yourself on. And it, at the very least, causes a tendency and a pressure to devalue your relationships. You see them as distractions and a waste of time, and you cannot put time and effort into them because that takes away from effort in your own growth and your own goals. And at worst, you straight up judge them and perceive them as less valuable because of the value system that you're held captive to. Another consequence of a growth-centered worldview is general selfish and unfulfilling choices and lifestyle. It is very easy to fall into the trap when growth is the main focus of sacrificing your morality in order to achieve optimal growth, in order to maximize rate of growth. It's very easy to sacrifice other people and to find yourself doing things that don't align with who you want to be because they rapidly increase your material wealth or your status or your own personal series of goals, whatever they be. Another really sad and depressing negative consequence of a growth-centered worldview is the tendency to nurse and actively develop core wounds instead of trying to heal them. This is something I've done my entire life, because as much as I say now, I was not aware of my insecurity and my sense of inadequacy and the role they were playing in my life, I reached a point where I was. I remember having a conversation with somebody in which I directly said, I know this is probably not the healthiest motivation for growth, but I like the impact it has, and so I'm not going to change it. And I see that advice online sometimes I've heard it said, use what you have. If you have shame and if you have inadequacy and insecurity, harness it, use it. And to some extent, I see the value in that advice, because when you have nothing, you do kind of have to use the resources at your disposal. But the life that leads to is horrendous. Instead of finding inner peace and satisfaction and a strong, resilient sense of self-worth, it creates a life in which you actively choose to keep hating yourself and keep being dissatisfied and keep feeling worthless because you so desperately want to achieve something extraordinary. Another thing that I really have struggled with, and I still struggle with, honestly, is I have tended to reject joy or self-love because it is not yet earned. I think this is I see it in other people. I imagine people who are very fixated on growth and personal development struggle with this as a whole. There have been points where the underlying thought process that goes into my way of being is I don't want to be compassionate. I don't want to love myself. I don't want to let go of my self-hatred and my insecurity, because if I do, I might not accomplish as much. And if I don't accomplish enough, then my entire life and existence doesn't have value. And there's been a struggle to accept this idea of self-love, because I'm terrified that I will accomplish less in my life by doing so. And I still am. I still struggle with that fear. I still struggle with the thought popping in my head of, is that worth sacrificing for the sake of maximizing growth? And it's so sad. It's so obvious that it's not. It's so obvious that 20% more external achievement at the cost of living your entire limited lifetime in dissatisfaction and holding your sense of self-worth captive to achievement, an extraordinary, potentially impossible achievement, is ridiculous. But even so, I still struggle, and I think a lot of other people do too, and it causes a lot of pain. The final pressing, huge negative consequence to a growth-centered worldview is it creates a desperate attempt to control an uncontrollable reality in order to maintain self-worth. Looking back on my life, I set huge goals for 20, 30, 40 years out. And there was this point of arrival that I was seeking in which I truly believed if I just accomplish this, if I accomplish this massive thing, I can build a life in which I'm finally feel good enough and everything is perfect and I'll have arrived at this state of being that I would not have said the word perfect, but that's how I imagined it to be. And the reality is, imagining a future 30 years from now is fantasy. It is completely artificially and ignorantly designed. We are tiny beings. We barely understand anything. Our ability to grasp reality and to maintain perspective on the world around us is very limited. And to think that we're capable of looking out 30 years in the future and future casting and creating our vision perfectly is delusional. Maybe it happens, but more likely than not, a lot of uncontrollable, unforeseen factors are going to come into play that's going to change or destroy the vision. And if our sense of self-worth is attached to this vision 30 years into the future and the perfect attainment of it, we are destined to hate ourselves in our lives the entire time. So that is some of the most depressing and crippling aspects of a growth-centered worldview. Now, a well-being-centered value system. I think one of the most important things that has taken me a long time to grasp, and again, which I still lose sight of a little bit, is that there's still so much room for growth in a well-being-centered value system. Growth is still a central aspect of fulfillment and purpose. But the difference in this sort of value system is that it is properly integrated and balanced in the overall system. Huge benefit of shifting into this. And I want to emphasize, I have not arrived in any way. I don't think I have fully shifted my value system. This is a fresh insight and process for me, but I'm trying, and I'm really trying to think through the ramifications of doing so. From what I can tell, from what I believe, shifting into a worldview or into adopting a value system in which well-being is the dominant value is going to result in a way of being that is just as focused on growth and purpose as it is presence and acceptance, which is incredibly important because it means that people can strive towards goals and they can pursue goals with full effort. And if it doesn't come to fruition, which, let's be real, is somewhat likely given how tiny we are in our existence in this universe that we have very little control of, we can still love ourselves regardless. The achievement doesn't matter anymore. It's all about the pursuit. The pleasure and the fulfillment and the purpose comes from the striving, not from the achievement themselves. And it unlocks this sense of self-worth that is detached from outcomes. And that is a wonderful place to be, I think. I can't say I've gotten there or reached that permanent state. I still kind of alternate between these a lot. But another benefit of a well-being-centered value system is it's a lot less susceptible to selfish and evil action. A lot of the time, it's far easier to maintain a focus or aim your growth towards something that is loving and compassionate and positively impactful, because it's no longer about maximizing growth at the cost of everything else. Growth is a aspect of a much healthier way of being. And this is the benefit that I really still struggle to accept and find peace in, but the ability to relax and enjoy relationships and open yourself up to new experiences just because they're interesting and joyful, not because they are productive, without feeling this overarching sense of unrest or self-condemnation. My whole life, anytime I have relaxed in any way, anytime I do something that is not designed to optimize my growth, I have had this voice in my head saying, you're screwing it up. If you keep doing this, you are not going to achieve your goals. You have to act in perfect alignment with your vision and your growth, or else you won't achieve it. And the real voice, the real underlying message was, if you aren't perfect, you won't achieve your goals. And if you don't achieve your goals, your existence is worthless. And the ability to spend time with relationships and spend time doing things purely for the sake of joy and excitement, that is powerful. That is one of the best parts of life. And an inability to do so because growth is the only thing that matters is incredibly debilitating. Overall, the key message here is this: growth is only useful in its ability to enhance the well-being you experience throughout your life. Regardless of what belief system that any of us hold, whether we believe in an afterlife, one of the major religions, the afterlife described in those, whether we believe in reincarnation, that we're going to die and then enter a new conscious experience, or we believe that death is non-existence, it doesn't really matter. The common knowledge that I think most human beings accept is death is the end of our time on this earth as this being. And with that, the somewhat cold reality is that all of our accomplishments will fade. Our legacy will be entirely forgotten. No one will know we existed. And our ultimate impact in this universe will equate to nothing over a long enough time horizon. If our pursuit of growth results in us spending our entire life feeling dissatisfied, discontent, and inadequate, then it is not worth it. That is not a worthwhile sacrifice. The things that we are sacrificing for mean nothing in the end. And so trying to live a life that optimizes for the experiences we have, that enhances them and makes them as desirable and joyful and fulfilling as possible, seems like the only thing that is really worth doing. If you care about growth, then you likely have some vision for the future and an idea of this idealized version of yourself that you have been chasing. When you look at this vision for the future, when you chase your goals, when you try to become this ideal version of yourself, I think it's worth questioning the motivation behind it. I think growth is a beautiful thing. It is absolutely something that is worth pursuing. But it's important to stop and ask yourself questions like, do I enjoy the experience of pursuing this, or do I feel like I have to? Are the sacrifices I am making leading to a more or less fulfilling life? Am I growing because I love growth, or because I feel like I have to in order to find peace? How do I talk to myself or react when I fail to hit my goals? And what does that reveal? Speaking from my own experience, I have been consumed by self-hatred for most of my life, and I am really trying to heal those wounds. I am trying to shift into a more fulfilled version of myself, and I'm really accepting that it's a long process. Who I am right now is the result of 25 years of experience. The thought that I can just change who I am fundamentally immediately after it being the result of decades of lived experience is delusional. But even though it's a long process, I think spending a couple years or even a decade putting effort into shifting into a well-being-centered value system is far better than an entire lifetime spent living in dissatisfaction and discontent. Again, growth is a wonderful process that can be horrendously destructive if fueled by and channeled towards the wrong things. If you are listening to this and struggling with any of these same tendencies, I really encourage you to explore your relationship with growth. And the message I want to make clear, the message I'm trying to make clear to myself is this: healing your wound will not destroy your ambition, it will enhance it. It will allow your desire to growth and your ambition to help build a fulfilling life of freedom and peace rather than building a endless, inescapable cage. I really appreciate anyone who takes the time to watch this. I am really enjoying the process of starting up this podcast, starting up this channel, even though it is intimidating, and I am reaching that stage where I am starting to really recognize how little I know, how poor my skill sets in this area are, and I'm starting to become aware of how much room for growth and how difficult it will be to really build this. But nonetheless, I am enjoying the process, and any attention that you give me is extremely valued, and I'm grateful for it, especially given this point in the process, in the startup. If you enjoyed what you heard in this episode, or if you didn't, either way, leave a comment. Tell me about it. I would love to have a conversation about why this does or does not apply to your life. If you like the episode and like the idea, please subscribe. I will be posting these weekly from here on out, so feel free to come back if you'd enjoyed it. And again, thank you. I am grateful for your time. Until next week.